Good morning. It is Monday, August 3rd, 2015. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. Coming up later today, a weekend of carnage in Israel after an 18-month-old baby is burned alive in a suspected Jewish hate crime referred to as price tag in the country and condemned by Israeli politicians as terror. Violence in Turkey escalates as the standoff between Ankara and the PKK, the Kurdish party, intensifies. And later on the show, the Associated Press releases hundreds of YouTube videos of its decades worth of news coverage in an enormous digital project. Good morning, I'm Yael Avi, and we begin in Israel, where a weekend of horrific violence against a Palestinian family by suspected Jewish terrorists on the heels of a stabbing by a convicted Orthodox Jewish assailant in the Jerusalem Gay Pride Parade that cost a life and wounded another 5 has rocked the Israeli society and ended with demonstrations in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem against hate crimes. Above all, the arson attack in the West Bank Palestinian town of Duma that resulted in the burning alive of an 18-month-old Ali Dawabsheh has put Israel on alert. The Israeli Defense Forces said it fears the attack by suspected Jewish extremists will lead to an escalation among the Palestinian community. Over the weekend, indeed, several clashes between IDF soldiers and Palestinians were recorded across the West Bank. In response to the attack, which the IDF also labeled Jewish terror and which led to worldwide condemnation, Israeli politicians came out with harsh condemnations of their own from across the political spectrum. But the incident, nonetheless, is causing a sharp divide in spite of its gruesome nature. So much so that Israeli President Reuven Rivlin, who spoke in one of the anti-hate demonstrations carried out in the country over the weekend, has had to file a death threat complaint against him after images of him posted online called for his attack. And so, once again, the Israeli society stands divided with sharp voices from every side and no reconciliation in sight. We're joined in studio by Peace Now Director General Yariv Oppenheimer. Good morning to you. Also by Senior Defense Analyst from Haaretz, Amir Oren. Good morning to you. Also by Head of the Efrat Local Council, Oded Ravivi. Thank you very much for being with us this morning. Good morning. And as well as the Director of the Israel Movement for Reform and Progressive Judaism Reform, Rabbi Attorney Gilad Kariv. That is a very, very, very big lead up to your name. But good to have you with us. Before we break this down, though, let's take a look at the latest from Israel and the West Bank and break it down from there.
The brutal act of violence has turned into a brutally violent discourse.
Flames have spread in our country, flames of violence, flames of hate, flames of false, twisted belief. Flames that allow bloodshed in the name of the Torah, in the name of morality, in the name of the love of the land of Israel. The Jewish and democratic Israel, the democratic and Jewish, is in need today for a wake-up call.
What seemed by most to be a justified and natural condemnation by Israeli President Reuven Rivlin was not accepted by all. President of the Arabs, you sold your soul to the devil, and I prayed that another Yigal Amir, the murderer of former Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, will rise and cleanse you and the Arabs from our Jewish country, are only some of the harsh comments Rivlin received on social media, leading his office to ask for a police probe into the incitement. In the meantime, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, while vowing to catch the murderers, criticized the Palestinian Authority's lack of condemnation following similar incidents on their side.
We condemn and will root out these murderers. We will hunt them to the end. They name town squares after child murderers, and these differences cannot be blurred or hidden. And it is important to say this at a time when we are condemning and uniting against the criminals in the midst of our people.
But fears of escalation keep rising both in Jerusalem and in Ramallah. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has instructed local security forces to foil any likely revenge attacks following the fatal arson. Palestinian media reported that Abbas is willing to prevent any attacks in order to not lose the diplomatic advantage that the Palestinian Authority gained as a result of the incident. In Israel, Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon ordered security forces to reinforce administrative detention of right-wing activists suspected in involvement in terror attacks against Palestinians, while the manhunt after the perpetrators of Friday's murderous arson continues.
Amir Oren of Haaretz, I'd like to start with you just to ask, where does the investigation stand at this point when it comes to the perpetrators of the arson of the Palestinian family home?
There's a gag order for the entire month of August So even if there was some progress to report, we couldn't have reported it. Right. But as far as is known up to now, there is nothing to report. However, what you can see in the papers today, or could have watched on the TV News,
looking at the paper that you work for,
is that the security agencies have conducted a briefing for reporters, and the gist of it is that they have been following, if following is the right word, because they didn't really monitor them, they have been following a few dozen extremists who are off in the wilderness, on the hills of Judea and Samaria, and they think that these are real anarchists out to topple the government, no less, that this is no longer what you referred to as tag price tag, but they are now bent on a real upheaval of Israeli society and government. And if that's so, the question, of course, is, if you are so smart today, Mr. Shin Bet, how come you didn't foil the attack 3 days ago? 3
days ago, before it happened. And I think that everybody around this table will agree that the gruesome nature of this attack, you know, is beyond words in many ways. And Oded Raviv, you're the head of the Efrat municipality. I don't want to put you straight on the gun, but there was a lot of condemnation, just putting aside for a second what's the condemnation in Israel. But, you know, across the world, over the weekend, everybody saw the wreckage of the Palestinian family's home in this gruesome, you know, act of violence. Is there, I mean, there are a lot of fingers pointing that the incitement and the idea of, you know, of the settlement movement and the right-wing factions in this country calling for, you know, that the justice ministries, you know, don't know what they're doing, that this is actually coming on the heels of houses that were evacuated in Bet El. Isn't there no point of just looking internally and seeing, is there too much incitement going on within the right-wing community and, case in point, the settler community?
I definitely think that every day we wake up and we need to look in the mirror, not just to see how we look, but also to see what we've said yesterday and what we feel and what we think and what we project outside. I definitely, as an example, am a person that calls for obeying the law, came condemning people who called the battle over the destruction of the two houses, because I don't think those are the terms that we should be using. But definitely there are people who forget what their borders are and forget which terminology to use. And I think if we know who the people are behind these acts, they should definitely put behind bars for a very long time so everybody else will know and will think twice before they even do anything which is against the law.
Well, we're looking at a frightening phenomenon. A year ago, a young Palestinian boy was also murdered, was actually set on fire. Needless to say, that came on the heels also of the 3 Israeli youths that were killed last year. But this, you know, be it price tag or not price tag, this is the mentality of an eye for an eye that doesn't seem to lead anywhere in many ways. Is there any type of calling of looking for within the society of the settler community? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, Amir, it seems to be, you know, the thought is that the perpetrators came from within Judea and Samaria, correct?
Well, you know, Mr. Ravivi represents the mainstream of the settler establishment. But the irony is that yesterday's subversive acts against established authority, like the Rabin government of the 70s, are today's accepted status quo. And each time, then it was Gush Emunim, right, which was on the right fringe of Israeli politics. Now they are in the middle of politics, and there is a new fringe. So one should not, to my mind, hold this distinction. Either you accept the fact that Israel, as an occupying power, has the responsibility to protect the security of all of the citizens or inhabitants there, including the Palestinians, which Israel failed, or you pay the consequences.
Or you pay the consequences. Yeah, you know, Yariv Oppenheimer, I want to ask you, because you're like our Peace Now resident leftist in the studio in many ways. There were demos that were carried out in Israel over the course of the weekend. There were 2 horrific incidents, which I personally don't think are connected. I think, you know, there's the incident in Jerusalem, Gay Pride Parade, and then there's what happened in the West Bank. And there is no, I'm wondering where the left is in all of this. What are you calling for? What are you calling for change, but in a way that is actually not just, many people will argue against the left that it's just rhetoric and nothing is done until these horrific acts are perpetrated, by the other side. What is the left calling for?
First of all, we are Israelis before we are leftists or peaceniks, and like every Israeli, we are shocked about what happened in the West Bank, and we feel not just ashamed but also some guilt, because we feel that this is our people now, and this is our country that cannot protect these innocent civilian people's lives, and this is a very bad feeling regardless of political identity or ideology. What we expect from the current government, not so much, I have to say. We don't think that this government is going to end the conflict. We don't think, by the way, that without ending the occupation, we will be able to really get into the question of incitement and hurting civilians and hurting innocent people. I believe Oded Revivi when he said that he condemned it, for sure. I know him and the people that he represents, but I think that it's too easy. It's too easy in the morning to settle in the West Bank and in the evening to mourn the Palestinian death, because there is a connection. When you believe that occupation is the moral thing to do, when you believe that it's okay to take the right of the Palestinian and just to ignore it, to allow them to live, but not to give them the basic rights that we are having, the message to the new generation, the youth, is that we are superior and the Palestinian is one grade. And then the outcome is that most of the settlers will be mainstream. They will have moral occupation, but there will be groups all the time that will take it one step further and will say, if this is the situation, if this is the values that we are living under, so it's okay to hurt the Palestinians, it's okay to take them out of their land, it's okay to eventually even to attack them and sometimes to kill them. And I think that we cannot just say, listen, this is just a small group that doesn't represent us. We need to look at the history, and the history shows, and it's coming too rapidly, that the violence is coming from the right, and usually from the settler movement and from people that believe in their God more than they believe in morality or the rule of the state of Israel, and this is a very big red line that should be taken.
That should be taken into account. I'm looking though at the fact that this is causing such divide within the Israeli community, and I'm almost glad that we have a rabbi with us. But yeah. Gilad Kariv, when you're looking at those divisions, violence aside, and also I just want to go quickly back to what happened over the weekend. In Jerusalem, an incident that to me I think is a terrible incident of also a police, apropos Shin Bet, of a police mess up in Jerusalem of letting a person who perpetrated a certain crime 10 years ago out of jail 3 weeks before a parade and then not following up on him. But those seem to be, yesterday a girl that was stabbed there died. Her name is Shira Banki. Okay, Shira Banki came as a show of support. Shira Banki was stabbed. Shira Banki's 16. She's no longer alive. Now, when it comes to those divisions within the Jewish society, it seems like the community is breaking apart, be it left or right, and all moral compass is completely lost. How does one bridge that divide?
Let's start by saying that those two events are not connected directly, but they are connected. And we need to understand and to identify the fact that Israel is failing in a systematic way in dealing with religious extremism and with religious fundamentalism here in Israel. And we need to be very careful. On the one hand, not to blame entire communities, but at the same time to understand that this is not a very small group that is taking a decision to go against the law. The environment in Israel is allowing the emerge of those small groups of Jewish terrorists. And if we want to deal with this situation, and I'm referring both to the terror attack in Jerusalem and the terror attack in the village of Duma, if we want to block those events in the future, we need to change the atmosphere. We need to ask ourselves where we are failing in cultivating an educational and public atmosphere that is based on the concept of pluralism. Israel is failing in presenting the needed legal measures in order to deal with those phenomena, and at the same time we're not investing what we should invest. Because this is a complicated society, right, because this is a diverse society, we need to invest much more in educating our younger generation to a pluralistic description of reality. And here I must say that we will do an enormous mistake if we will focus on the failure of the police or the failure of the Shin Bet. Of course, we need to investigate how come the security agencies didn't identify the crime before it happened. But this is a much bigger challenge that we face as a society.
The fact that those crimes are even,
yes, and more than that. Look, we can't be surprised that in a country that does not do anything against rabbis, that write a book of the halachic need to kill Gentiles, and if those rabbis continue to teach, and even funded by the government, their yeshivot, their batei midrash, their institutions, their schools are funded by the government, we can't be surprised that few students are implementing the lesson. Now again, not all the rabbis in sovereign Israel, in the occupied territories, most of them do not hold those views. Most of them definitely are standing against those halachic concepts. But there are too many rabbis that do not.
Yael, if I may, the question is the chain of command and the source of authority. Now, when David Ben-Gurion took part in founding Israel, he insisted on fighting all of these undergrounds, be they from the right or from the left, who challenged the authority of the state. And if there are groups of people who say that they obey a higher authority from above, and they ignore what the institutions of the state have decided to do, this is a subversive problem. And you said earlier that people should be, Oded said people should be put behind bars, and you said in order to deter others, some of them are willing to sacrifice themselves. This is not a matter for deterrence. They think that this is important enough to be killed, to kill and be killed for it.
I'm sorry, but what you're describing is martyrdom. What you're describing is martyrdom, right, on this, a Jewish type of martyrdom.
Hashem, of course.
And that, in many ways, is something that I think the Israeli society tends to criticize in other societies. But speaking of what can be done, specifically in this incident, I want us to go straight to the West Bank, actually, where we're going to Ron Friedman, of I-24 News editor Ron Friedman, standing by with the latest developments when it comes to what has been going on in the West Bank at this point. Ron, good morning to you. Where are you exactly? And also, there is, you and I discussed yesterday, that there is in play, or there is a consideration of looking at harsher measures to be employed against the Jewish community across the West Bank. Where does that stand this morning?
Hi, good morning. I'm here in the Tapuach Junction in northern Samaria, in southern Samaria, heart of the West Bank. It's been 3 days since the 18-month-old Ali Dawausha was murdered in his village in Duma, about 10 kilometers away from here. So far, we haven't received any reports about arrests, about finding the people who attacked him and his family. As we know, his parents and his 4-year-old brother are still in hospital in severe condition, struggling for their lives after being nearly burnt alive. What we do know is that the Israeli Security Cabinet yesterday convened a special meeting in which they decided that they're going to take special measures in order to deal with these types of attacks. We know that the Security Cabinet's internal meeting of the chief ministers, including Prime Minister Netanyahu, decided that they were going to treat Friday's incident as a terror incident, not just as a hate crime or as a regular criminal act, but as an act of terrorism, which means that they have some tools at their disposal which they can give security services. Chiefly among them is a pretty controversial one, and that's implementing administrative detention for people who carry out such attacks. Now, Israel in the past has been severely criticized for using administrative detention, which means holding prisoners without trial. When it comes to Palestinian prisoners, we'll see what the backlash is when it comes to acts that we believe that Jews carried out.
The Jews carried out. Ron, staying with us, you know, I have to ask you a little, Vivi, because you seem to be the man on the spot here. But when we're looking at that violence that we saw over the course of the weekend, especially in the West Bank, it was perpetrated, you know, by people who have a certain affiliation with the right or have a certain affiliation with the settler movement. Then we're looking at pictures of the Israeli president, granted a pomp and circumstance position by the Israeli President Reuven Rivlin with the headscarf, the Arab headscarf, incredibly reminiscent of pictures that we saw of Yitzhak Rabin 20 years ago. Makes me think that nothing has really changed when the incitement against Yitzhak Rabin began. The incitement seems to come from the right. You know, I'm not saying this in order to just blame fingers, but you do not see, you know, peace activists going around asking for somebody to be killed if their opinion is different than yours. Is there something that is being done wrong in the settler movement that needs to be revisited from within? Because can we even call this minor extremism if we're seeing these incidents more and more?
First of all, I'm not sure we're seeing them more and more. Second of all, I think I said I wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and take responsibility over things which I do.
But do others?
Just a minute, let me complete, okay? You bought me 3 against 1, and I think there's I think there is here a common denominator between the 3 other people in this studio who basically absolutely take no responsibility of generalizing big parts of the population, splitting the population. If there wouldn't have been such an outcry against half of the population saying you are all to blame, you would have seen that there would have been much more solidarity. So if there are people who are interested in solidarity of these people, so yes, let's find those extremists, let's put them behind bars. Those rabbis were sanctioned, their funding was stopped, but Gilad Karif wants to look at it in a certain way, and he looks at it in a certain way. The main problem, as far as I'm concerned, is the fact that those who are responsible to make sure that the law is kept and obtained in this country are failing time after time to find out who are the people behind these price tag events or behind these brutal murders, and they're not managing to have any clue as to who is responsible. When there's no responsibility and there's no people to blame, to go and generalize half of the population and say you're all to blame, so we see that the hatred is growing broader, the split in the nation is growing bigger, and that's the upsetting thing. Instead of finding the common denominator, yes, there are rabbis who are condemning it. Most of the people who live in Judea and Samaria are not affiliated ideologically living there. 2/3 of them have nothing to do with any ideology living there. Only 1/3 are what called modern Orthodox Jews, and even they are not all there because of ideological reasons. Yes, but to go and generalize 500,000 of people who are responsible for a murder of this baby, so yes, you can come and say, what are you doing wrong? Why am I doing anything wrong besides what Gilad is doing wrong? We both have kids, we both raise our kids, we both teach our kids the Torah the way we believe it, we both teach our kids to accept other people and to expect to treat other people equally. So why am I more responsible than Gilad? Just because I live somewhere else?
Gilad, you're looking in.
First of all, I think that we are all responsible. We're all responsible. And still, I think that each community, each Israeli community, is responsible to check itself. And it's, for me, you know, it's almost unbelievable, because I opened my statement by saying that I think that not all the rabbis belong to the same
way. But you want to generalize
afterwards. No, I didn't.
You did?
What I said is that I do not identify the state of Israel, taking the necessary measures in order to set red lines. And unfortunately, whenever there is such a terrible event, it takes some Israeli leaders 24 hours before they start to talk about solidarity in order to refrain from cheshbon nefesh, from a real investigation of what is happening inside our communities. And this is not the time to talk about solidarity. This is the time to talk about
split.
not
Who
about
is to
split.
yeah.
It's about the time to take serious measures in order to secure our ability to live together.
If the police and the army are not managing to do it, you expect a mayor to go and investigate who was the murderer of the child in Duma?
Because you are responsible for the education system in your municipality.
You know exactly who is responsible for the educational system.
The minister, yes, we know.
Gentlemen, the lady in the room, one second. Yes, Mr. Orn.
Odette has a point regarding the generalization of the settler community by non-settlers.
No, a valid one. I'd like to apologize about that, but it's a question that needs to be asked.
But Yigal Amir wasn't a settler, and the incitement you saw against President Rivlin yesterday came from within the Likud, from someone from Beersheba, not someone who lived in the territories. And the question is, how come the settler community and its supporters have the political power so that the tail wags the dog? The settler community is probably 5 or 6% of the Israeli population, but it sets the tone and the policy for the entire government by virtue of their holding the power within the party in power. So,
I will tell you what, Yariv Oppenheimer, I will answer that from your own, because we had Daniela Weiss in the studio several days ago on Thursday, and she said that the settler movement won. And in many ways, it did.
We are not in the game is not over yet, and I don't know who is winning, and I'm not in a competition. I believe that eventually Israel will have the two-state solution. Not because we will like it to be. We will be forced to. I hope we will do it before, but I think that it's so easy to go to the police and the Shin Bet and all the security people and to blame them. We can go out now from the studio and ask teenagers, what do you think about the Arabs? And they will tell you very, very nasty things that we cannot even air. And this is an outcome of a right-wing political system that is speaking about the Arabs like they are the devil. They are speaking about the Arabs like they have no rights. They are speaking about us superior over the Palestinians or the Arabs in general. And what we are doing in the settlements is actually to implement this kind of values. And when we are doing that, this is our policy, this is our language. This is not a surprise that we will find ourselves in such a.
And sadly, because we can continue the discussions for hours, as they have been doing for years in the Middle East. It's all the time that we have. Gentlemen, I want to thank you all. Everybody's voice, everybody's opinion is valid, and I hope you could portray this in the studio this morning. I hope that there'll be less violence this week in the region. Thank you for being with us. Speaking of violence, sadly, when we get back, between Turkey and the Kurdish militias, also on the rise as the PKK retaliates against Turkish airstrikes in Iraq. And we're talking about a lot of Turkish airstrikes in Iraq over the weekend. Stay with us. We'll take a closer look. First, though, let's hear some more of the morning headlines. Good morning. I-24 News on this. I had to look down. August 3rd. 3rd, thank you, because that's part of your job. August 3rd, 2015, and this is the week to introduce our fabulous Ruthie Sinai, I-24 News senior news editor, who's going to replace Ami Kaufman, who is out on assignment somewhere in an all-inclusive hotel in Cyprus.
I can't replace him. I'm sitting in for him.
You're sitting in for Ami Kaufman with the news you missed while scanning the headlines.
And no bow tie.
Ami
always has a bow tie. Okay, all right. We start off with some very sad news, which I have to say, maybe it's because I have two daughters, really hit me hard. A 16-year-old girl named Shira Banki, yes, died of her wounds she sustained when in the Jerusalem Gay Parade last week. Just to remind our viewers, a ultra-Orthodox man who was a repeat offender because he had done this 10 years ago.
Yeah.
wounding. 10 years ago, he attacked a gay pride parade. The ultra-Orthodox think this homosexuality is an abomination and that it's banned by the Torah.
Punishable by death, according to that train of thought.
So anyway, he served 10 years in jail, was released, and 3 weeks after he was released, last Thursday, he went to the gay parade in Jerusalem, and again, this time, instead of stabbing 3, he stabbed 6. Shira was one of these girls. She was in critical condition. Apparently, the knife had plunged into her lungs, and she passed away.
It was a terrible weekend, I think, of carnage in Israel all around. Terrible. And then followed by this horrific burning of an 18-month-old baby. But we're looking at papers such as this one, which this is Haaretz newspaper, and this is a vigil for Shira Banki with the candles. And to me, it's so sad. It's reminiscent also of 20 years ago, of candles, Yitzhak Rabin, and just, the whole narrative of hate that just seems to sustain itself in the
narrative of hate followed by a narrative of love, because these outpourings are also very typical of kind of a
vigils,
post-trauma.
Yes. And moving along.
Next door, Egypt. So Secretary John Kerry, who is still kind of limping but doing quite well, was in Cairo yesterday. And
on his selling trip.
He's on a selling trip. Cairo was the first stop. Today he's already in Doha, in Qatar. And basically he came to Egypt to say, listen, we've had our differences. We don't really like your human rights record. We don't like Sisi taking over, pushing out a democratically elected president. But nonetheless, we need you, and we want to be best friends again, and we need you to fight Iran, and we're going to give you...
quickly before Russia inches in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Russia, the Chinese, everybody else, and they are
we
ready.
have a report about this. Let's have a look.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is in Cairo Sunday for talks with Washington's longtime ally at the start of a regional mini-tour to ease Gulf countries' concerns over the Iran nuclear deal. In a press conference this afternoon, Kerry made the administration's view clear that a nuclear deal signed between Iran and the world powers last month was a positive development for the region. Kerry also met his Egyptian counterpart, Sameh Shoukry, for a strategic dialogue between the allies, which have had a tumultuous relationship since Egypt's 2011 revolution. In late March, the United States lifted its freeze on annual military aid of $1.3 billion to Cairo, imposed because of Washington's concern with the El-Sisi regime's violation of human rights during its crackdown on Islamic activists and the Muslim Brotherhood. But relations between the two countries have begun to improve, with a commitment to boost financial ties in the strategic partnership in fighting the Islamic State terror group in the Middle East.
The agenda for our delegations today is very broad. It ought to be. It includes the threat posed by Daesh, which is serious. We all know that defeating terrorism requires a long-term strategy. Border security and law enforcement actions are a significant part of the equation.
The strategic dialogue today represents a serious opportunity for the two parties to review the different aspects of the Egyptian-American political, military, and economic relationship and evaluate this relationship to review once again what we've achieved to serve the interests of the two nations.
The Egyptian interest has already been enhanced by the lifting of the financial freeze, compounded by a delivery of 8 F-16 jets from Washington to Cairo last week. During the trip, some eyes are also pointed to where Kerry will not be, with Israel next door omitted from its current Mideast tour.
Yes.
Okay, on to the biggest mystery in aviation history. Again, Malaysian 370.
Maybe not such a mystery after all.
Well, it's looking like maybe a glimmer of, Agatha Christie has come to the rescue. Along with this piece of that apparently is a piece of the plane, we've got this fellow who's a groundskeeper. He's supposed to collect the garbage, and he now comes out and says, I was walking here a few months ago, and I saw this thing. I don't know what it was, and it was maybe a chair, or it was blue, and a couple of suitcases, but I thought it was rubbish, so I burnt them. Yeah.
So I burnt the evidence.
Anyway.
Oh God.
Yeah, but kidding aside, it looks like pieces of this
something that this might actually be, which at least is some closure to something that we dealt with. You remember we dealt with on a daily basis for weeks. Yes, Anne.
Okay, President Biden. Anybody? Okay,
Good one.
Joe Biden, Vice President, is considering a run for a third time for the Democratic nomination. Yeah, you're looking skeptical.
Yes,
but apparently, this has come up, especially because his son, who passed away a couple of months ago from brain cancer, apparently said, one of his dying wishes was
that he
consider it. And
I mean,
so
it's
the family.
But it's so American in many
very,
ways.
very. Yeah. Families getting together now for summer vacation. They're going to talk about it.
Consult over yachting.
Consult.
Okay.
Exactly.
No, that's we should be so lucky. Ruthie, all the time we have at this point.
Dear.
But I know. But I'm locking you in studio because I love you. As we move along. Speaking of news, Turkey has been top of the news since it launched its offensive against Kurdish fighters in northern Iraq last week, simultaneous to joining the anti-ISIS regional coalition. But ISIS aside, Turkey has been targeting Kurdish bases with airstrikes almost every day for a week. So much so that Iraq's Kurdistan regional government called on the Kurds to withdraw from the area to prevent even more civilian casualties. After a violent weekend inside Turkey itself, it seems fragile peace talks with the Kurdish Workers' Party, the PKK, are almost certainly over. 2 Turkish soldiers were killed, 24 wounded in a suicide blast, and first of its kind in the city of Agri in the eastern Turkey. Officials blame Kurdish fighters from the PKK for the bomb, which detonated some 2 tons of explosives at a military police station early yesterday morning. Joining me in studio is Idan Barir from the Department of Middle East and African History of the Tel Aviv University and a member of the Forum for Regional Thinking. Great having you with us. Good morning. Let's take a look at the following report from Turkey and break it down.
2 members of Turkey's security forces were killed and dozens were wounded early on Sunday morning in a suicide bombing blamed on the Kurdish PKK. The attack in Turkey's eastern province of Agri was carried out with a tractor loaded with 2 tons of explosives. Armed attacks by the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK, increased in recent weeks, and even more so since Turkey began targeting Kurdish camps in northern Iraq with airstrikes, one of 2 fronts in what Ankara is calling a, quote, synchronized fight against terror. Protesters took to the streets against Turkish airstrikes over the weekend in both Iraq and Turkey. Kurds in the northern Iraqi province of Sulaymaniyah protested against both the Turkish government and the president of Iraq's Kurdish autonomous region, who called for the PKK to withdraw from the territory. Demonstrators asked how the air campaign against the PKK is aiding with the fight against the Islamic State.
I wonder why Turkey hits our popular defense forces that fight the Islamic State. That means that the Turkish government protects IS and fights anyone who fights it.
Meanwhile, in Turkey, police used tear gas and water cannons on what was meant to be a march for peace.
We wanted to organize a march urging the continuation of talks with Kurdistan Workers' Party founder Abdallah Öcalan, the architect of peace and peace talks. But as you know, there is an atmosphere of war and chaos, especially in Kurdistan at the moment. Who wanted to create this atmosphere? It was the caretaker AK party government who wanted to create this chaos.
Since the air campaign began, both sides are disregarding an already fragile peace process.
Let's go straight to Bodrum in Turkey, where we're joined by freelance journalist Laura Wells. Laura, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Just looking at the last week and this carnage of violence in Turkey, reactions, though, in Turkey itself when it comes to what seems to be a campaign, pardon me for saying, actually a Turkish campaign against the PKK rather than ISIS.
I think that's really true. If you look at the airstrikes, there have been dozens upon dozens more against the PKK, both in northern Iraq as well as in Turkey, than on ISIS. When they struck ISIS, and that was only once right after the Suruç massacre, where 32 people died, they only sent in a handful of planes. So this is certainly true. Also, Turkey really believes that it has a domestic terrorist group, which is the PKK, on its own soil. And there's also a political aspect of this as well. certainly President Erdogan wants to change the system from parliamentary to presidential. Right. And what was in his way this time around was the pro-Kurdish party HDP, which was new to these parliamentary elections.
And finally actually made it in. And really quickly, is there any type or any way of gauging any kind of concern from the Turkish administration, from the international community at all, when it comes to that type of a battle against the PKK? Or you know, I'm being completely naive here right now.
Well, certainly, you know, the PKK has been identified as a terrorist group in the EU, in the United States for so long. And Turkey has a lot of leverage, for instance, in Cirluk Air Base. So that's what they just traded with the United States. Right. I think the United States is in a very difficult position. They certainly have worked well with the PKK affiliate in Syria, the YPG. And they've also worked extensively with the northern Iraq KRG Kurds. But it's very difficult because right now they're also at odds because Barzani, the president there, is an ally now of Erdogan. There's a lot of oil trade and a lot of anger and mistrust between many Kurds in different areas. In
different areas. Laura, thank you. That leads me to you. Barzani, apropos, the oddest when it comes to, you know, the oddest of I would say, partnerships with Erdogan. But where does this put the Kurds? Because on the ground, in its essence, they were the only ones who were making any kind of gains against ISIS, but seem now to be actually the main battle of Turkey, right?
Well, their achievements vis-a-vis ISIS was thanks not only to their alliance with the Turks, but to their alliance with the Americans. Right. That's another thing they would not like to jeopardize now. So you have to measure those two alliances, those two Kurdish alliances, first with the Americans and then with the Turks. Right. That brings an old-time rivalry they have with the PKK, a long-standing rivalry going back a long time, but let's say re-erupted last year. It's the 3rd of August is we mark today a year from ISIS invasion to Sinjar.
Wow.
The first forces. Sort of sad.
Yeah, and so that's exactly a year since then.
And then the first forces to come into Sinjar from through Syria, actually, where the PKK and the YPG, their proxy or ally friend, in Syria, northern Syria. Their intervention in Sinjar, which was historically a KRG or an Iraqi Kurdistan stronghold outside Iraqi Kurdistan, outside their territories, they formed a very serious risk to Iraqi Kurdistan, to the KRG, to Barzani's Barzani's hold over these areas. And their intervention started to sort of slip in to the KRG mainland, or if you want to say that, the areas of Mahmur very close to Erbil.
It's internal battles also within the Kurdish. Within the Kurdish community, within the Kurdish fighters, which is something that Turkey is actually capitalizing on at this point, right?
And the Kurds.
And the Kurds.
Both of them, both sides now blame the PKK for attacking the very lucrative oil export deal that the two parties signed, the KRG with the Turkish authorities, actually.
And I think that one of the things that when it comes to the Kurdish plight, in Iraq, what they have going for them is that they're sitting on so much oil, I think, in many ways.
And now they're exporting the oil independently. That's the first time ever that the Kurds are exporting oil through Turkey independently. And the PKK attack on the oil, the Kirkuk-Ceyhan oil pipe in Şırnak in Turkey 3 or 4 days ago, was
specifically
it targeted the most lucrative achievement that the Kurds, the Iraqi Kurds, had in years.
And all culminating, though, with the idea that Turkey will never allow on its border, you know, in that area, any type of autonomous Kurdistan.
Absolutely, and that's the pretext for their attacks on the PKK.
That's the pretext for anything and everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it keeps on going, but we will keep a closer look at that. I want to thank you, Idan Bari, very much for being with us this morning. When we get back, something entirely different. 1 million minutes of historical video dating back to 1895, from footage of a Hoover scooter floating on a cushion of air to Mussolini calling for world peace. Yes, that remarkable. All of these videos have been uploaded on YouTube by the Associated Press. We have them here. We'll take a closer look. Stay with us. It's fascinating. First, as in every morning, some more of the morning headlines. I-24 News Morning Edition on this August 3rd. This is the place to be. Before I give this whole intro, because Oren Nahari is here.
Oh, go ahead. I didn't know that's important.
Exactly. I just wanted to put you on the spot. Also with us, of course, is Amit Kling, culture editor of Time Out magazine. I just want to say that out loud. Great to have you with us. And here we go. So, the Associated Press is one of the largest and most trusted sources of independent news gathering, supplying a steady stream of news to its members, international subscribers, and commercial customers for nearly 200 years. It was founded in 1846, and the Associated Press has covered everything, all the major news events of the past 165 years. That's a lot of time. And of course, informed reporting of everything from wars and elections to championship games and royal weddings. Since the Pulitzer Prize was established in 1917, Associated Press has received 51 Pulitzers, almost as many as mine, just kidding, including 31 photo Pulitzers recently. And it launched an archive. This is why we're gathered here today. Recently, it launched an archive, which is the film and video archive of the Associated Press. One of the largest and most trusted sources is out there online on YouTube, and you can see it all. Hours of new footage, of video footage, is added daily with coverage from Associated Press Global News Gathering Network. And to discuss this amazing gift that has been given to us, an ambitious undertaking, making history visually available online, we are joined in studio, as you know, by senior foreign affairs editor Oren Nahari. And before we break it down, let's take a look at some of these pictures that are out there available to all of us. It's like Christmas. I'm very excited. And I'm joined from London by AP film archivist Jenny Hammerton. Jenny, good morning to you.
Good morning. Lovely to speak to you today.
Lovely to speak to you. And you actually, I love the fact that you work with all this amazing material. I mean, there are reasons I think we journalists become journalists. It's because we're news junkies. But you actually have a chance to sift through all of this daily. Do tell us
it's wonderful.
Do tell us a little bit about the project and also the first clip that you picked for us.
Okay, well, this is an amazing opportunity for us, putting all our footage on YouTube so that everyone can see it. It's very, very exciting. Up until now, really, it's been documentary filmmakers who've had access to our material, and we've worked with some wonderful filmmakers based in Israel who've used our footage to tell their stories. But now it's available to everyone, so historians are going to be really excited to see some of this material, and those working in education. So it's really a thrill for us to have everything available to everyone on YouTube.
And let's take a look first at a clip that we asked you to pick some of your favorite ones from this amazing project. I want us to take a look at the following clip that is a specific pick by you. Let's have a look.
She's here, said the headlines, and everyone knew they meant the American film star with the famous shape and the wiggly walk. London Airport was all keyed up for Marilyn's arrival. She was met by Sir Laurence Olivier and his wife Vivian Leigh. Miss Munro is Mrs. Miller now. That's her playwright husband. Next, a press interview, but this had its difficulties. It went something like this.
Now, wait a minute. Miss Munro, please. Miss Munro. What do you think of Miss Dawes, you see?
Later, at a London hotel, Marilyn agreed to face the cameras again. Once more, it became abundantly clear that her worldwide fame and popularity made her visit to Britain front-page news. We hope she'll like filming over here and thoroughly enjoy her stay.
And Jenny, I'm speechless at how much I love this footage because it's Marilyn Monroe. I know, it's this famous visit to London. What was the film that was, I'm asking my counterparts in the studio, the film about her several years ago, about that specific time in the UK?
My Week with Marilyn. My Night with Marilyn.
My Night with Marilyn. Exactly, My Week with Marilyn. Exactly, and and that's the real thing. Oren Nahari with us in studio. Obviously, you were there in London when Marilyn arrived. Yes.
By the way, she died this week in 1962, 5th of August. So
really?
It's even, everything is connected. And how do you know a person is not a celebrity like we say, you know, everybody's a celebrity.
Exactly.
Like
nowadays, everybody is a celebrity.
When you know a person by its first name only, like Elvis, like Marilyn.
Like Marilyn.
And she's still, 60 years later, she's still an icon, deservedly, with a combination of sex and vulnerability. And she was good when she performed in Some Like It Hot, in all the other magnificent films that she is there.
There are even Happy Birthday,
Mr. President. Well, that's come. I hope that John Kennedy slept on the couch that night. I mean, to embarrass your wife like that in front of all of Carnegie Hall
is beyond words. But sitting here in the Middle East, I'm going back to Jenny, because Jenny, you picked another clip that for us, I just want to tell you, and this is the only reference I'll give our viewers, is that my mother has been telling me of this incident that Jenny from the Associated Press has happened so many years ago. Let's take a look at the next one.
But not for 80 years had Tel Aviv had such a heavy fall of snow as in recent days. In fact, they'd had no snow at all for 25. Other parts of Israel have had similar weather, and those young enough to enjoy it have certainly seized the chance with both hands. In Syria, too, there's been tons of snow. In this case, it's the worst experienced for about 30 years, they say. Beirut presents a really remarkable scene, for snow and palm trees are seldom in the same picture. Certainly, the eastern end of the Mediterranean has had really freak weather to contend with this year.
Oren Nahari, history aficionado, the only thing that actually, to omit, I want to say as well, because I'm a former film student, I'm looking at that footage, and it's the same guy who does the voice for Casablanca, isn't it?
It's not only that. I mean, these are the voices of, you know, of Pathé films and all of the rest. And in Israel, it was Carmel and Geva, you know, with a booming voice of a certain era. It is 1950s, even without the black and white.
In Israel, the voice
of
a can opener has arrived to Tel Aviv.
Yes.
You know, what I couldn't help but thinking was that was obviously the first snowman all of them have ever done, because, you know, no snow for years before that, and appropriately, it's a terrible snowman. It's really bad.
It's a bad snowman.
No experience in the snowman building.
No.
But yeah, and the music, the drama.
Everything is dramatic, you know. Her Royal Highness just arrived today to Edinburgh. Yeah, these are the voices, and they are so very English of that era, the era of white England, of colonial England, and you know, you still hear the Raj, you still hear everything. One word about the news agencies. The most famous one, my apologies to AP, was founded by a man called Israel Yehoshaphat, who changed his name to Baron Julius Reuter. And
it all comes back to us, the Jews.
It is. The 5 first news agencies, Havas and the others, all were founded by Jews, as the old USSR, as Stalin used to say, cosmopolitan Jews, those who came from Central Europe, who knew many languages, and in a way, media. The Jews were prominent in media all around the world, and especially in this news business, the new news business, who's transcending frontiers and communities, and they understood and the prominence of the Jews in the modern Europe from 1850 onwards. And so we see now, you talked about hours, you're joking, more than 1 million minutes of footage, more than 550,000 newsreels like these ones, which tries to capsule the news stories. And of course, one of the weaknesses of our profession is we can show, at best, some will say we are never at our best, but let's leave it aside, we can show events. we cannot show what's happening beneath. We hope that when we show this this thing and that thing, and later we can show that moment, that event, this demonstration, that battle, later we can show, aha, this was what was beneath it all the time. You know, if it's for the fight for the blacks in the United States, for equality of rights, for women rights, for children's rights, wars, anti-colonialism, all those.
Do you think that the fact that all these minutes, for example, available now on YouTube, does it change our what does it mean about our perception of history? Does it just give us that moment of, be it glory or the moment of drama, and not the context?
No, they do not give the context. When you try to show, let's say, the Versailles Treaty in 2 minutes, or when you can try to show Verdun in 2 minutes, or the fall of Saddam, you know, on this day, 25 years ago, you remember that Saddam invaded Kuwait.
Kuwait, definitely.
It was 3rd of August. So when you show it, only later do you understand. But this is the first draft of history, as people used to say about journalism, and that is correct. The important stuff is the footage, not, with all due respect, not the reporter, not the anchorman with his booming voice, the footage, to see it happening.
To see it happening in real time. And apropos Saddam, my God, yes, that's April 9th, 2003, the Saddam statue falls down. That's a monumental moment, I think, that we're living to this day in many ways, but that's too much.
A moment of hope that shattered very quickly.
Very quickly, as we know, sitting here. But it is the time to shatter hope and move on to Amit Kling, the Hope Shatter, culture editor of Time Out magazine, with us. Not that much time left to keep many of them, but it is the web review, the viral spiral that is the web review.
All right.
Yes, because everything is online today.
Let's have some fun, right? First thing is, however, not as hilarious, but it's interesting. Do you remember that about a year ago, the biggest Bitcoin exchange, Mt. Gox, just disappeared?
Yes.
And a lot of money disappeared. Now, that was a moment that kind of shattered. I mean, Bitcoin was, people were arguing whether it's some new revolutionary way to make money. Is it a huge pyramid scheme? And Mark Karpeles was now arrested in Japan. It was finally found this weekend. They finally got caught up to him. He was just hiding in Japan the whole time, turns out. Now, what's interesting, even beyond the Karpeles story, that, you know, Mt. Gox in itself is not Bitcoin. It does not represent Bitcoin. But that was sort of the moment when the Bitcoin hype
just collapsed. The bubble blew up.
The bubble blew up, not for Bitcoin's fault, which is, there's a lot to discuss there. But after the Mt. Gox incident, people sort of just lost their trust in that.
I'm going to ask you to move along and not do what I'm still to this day, it's hard for me to understand Bitcoin, but I'm of an old generation. I'm looking at
can't claim to understand it myself completely.
You know, religion is cult plus time. So Bitcoin, you could argue, is dollar or sterling or what have you, plus time. If there is time, perhaps the time has run out on time.
Mark Karpeles is going to be doing some time anyway.
Yes, he will.
Time will be done by Mark Karpeles. Okay, next is just, let's take a look at this trailer that just came out over the weekend.
For the one question that has puzzled mankind since the beginning of time.
If God exists, then why did he make ugly people? 200-lander?
No, Derek, 2-lander. It's like a pun.
Thank you. I ask myself that question every morning.
I love Zoolander.
Yes,
I love Zoolander, and I think you know, Ben Stiller is in this nice position where he can afford to be doing completely idiotic comedies and can play in some serious movies, and he has the chops.
Yes, but he has to have a huge alarm sign in his bedroom with a poster of Adam Sandler.
No, but I think, you know, Adam Sandler just touched, he had that one good role in Punch Drunk Love years ago, where he said, like, he can do this.
He can do this.
And he never lived up to it because he just does not care. And Ben Stiller, he's working.
Yeah, he's leading his
but
way
anyway, Zoolander, you know, the first is a classic and the second is going to be great.
Quality film right there for you. One last one.
All right, so our friend Snoop Dogg, or should it be Snoop Lion?
Yes.
As you know, he calls himself now, he's into reggae. He was stopped by customs in Italy, and he was carrying $422,000 on him.
How much?
400, just short of $500,000.
Nice, in cash.
In cash, of course, in cash.
Oh my word!
And he was stopped by customs.
And got to have some petty cash with him, you know, for McDonald's, for something.
What if I get hungry? Yeah.
Oh, and how you look at the world like a rapper, and I like that. No, but
that's a first. That, I must tell you, is a first.
MC Nahari.
MC Nahari, guys.
Hopefully I last two, but...
We've got 20 seconds.
Okay, but yeah, so they confiscated half of it. Now, usually rappers have carriers who do that kind of stuff for them. I don't know why Snoop Dogg.
Maybe he was sick.
Maybe he was high.
We've got MC Nahari.
Maybe after Karpeles, he doesn't trust anybody anymore.
Could be
Who knows?
that. Could be that. MC Nahari in the house, and Amit Kling, culture editor of Time Out magazine, Tel Aviv. That was it for this segment. Stay with us, because when we get back, we blow the lid on kale. Definitely. The kale controversy. First, though, some more of the morning headlines. Good morning, I-24 News Morning Edition. On this August 3rd, it's summer. It's a very, very hot summer in the Middle East. In Israel, where we're sitting, it's approximately 70% humidity, but that does not stop Shai Ringel from dressing like a rock star.
It almost stopped me. It almost stopped everything I'm doing.
No, it looks like it, but look at you. Look fabulous, fabulous. Nobody can match it. I mean, Maya Kremer can try, but still.
Thank you for lying.
No, thank you for lying. And it is the time to move. Yes, and happy to be joined in studio by lifestyle expert Maya Kremer, who's here with everything that's new in the fashion lifestyle, everything you must know in this world. And especially for me today, we're going to kill kale.
Kill kale.
It's my new slogan. On the contrary. But you start with what you want.
Yes. Okay. So, you know, there's been a big controversy over kale. Is it healthy? Is it not? This is what everyone's talking about right now. Yes.
Yes.
And, you know, first of all, do you know what kale is? I mean,
I think we need to explain to Sharon.
Yeah.
I know what kale is.
It's a green vegetable. It contains vitamin A, C, K, E, omega-3, iron.
Does it?
It does contain all of that. It contains other things as well.
Yes.
We'll get to that.
I want to stop you for a second. It's a mother to cook. It is so hard to cook kale. Have you tried?
Of course I've tried. And there's easy ways, and I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
And you're going to try it. I'm going to bring it to you, and you're going to have to eat it next time.
Oh, my God.
It's used in salads. It's used in shakes, pasta dishes. It's basically you cook it like spinach. And although it's been used for thousands of years, it's only become popular now.
I tried to cook it like spinach. It came out like seaweed. I mean, seriously. But I'm just saying. Okay. And
so in 2007, I'm going to go over a little bit of the history of kale. Yes, but there is a history of kale. Kale is a super popular thing.
I think I heard Shai Ringel laugh.
It's a celebrity.
Okay. Yes. So yes.
No, but World Living Magazine in 2007 deemed kale the superfood. Okay. And by 2008, over 500 babies in the U.S. alone were named kale.
Sorry.
It's like calling your child carrot.
It's like calling your child carrot or apple, right?
Apple,
Gwyneth, exactly. Apple.
We're gonna get to Gwyneth.
Yeah, exactly. Gwyneth is a big kale prophet.
Yep. So in 2009, Martha Stewart published a recipe for kale slaw instead of coleslaw. But who really made it popular was Gwyneth Paltrow. She came on the Ellen Show, and she made kale chips. She was promoting her new cookbook. She made kale chips, and since then, everybody has been making kale chips.
Gwyneth Paltrow's
including myself.
Kale.
Yeah.
Sorry, yes. It's just to me, and I can say this as a blonde, but it's this terrifying notion. Yeah, there we go. There's Gwyneth with her kale shake.
Yep.
Yes.
That means that every time you eat kale, you support Gwyneth Paltrow, because that's evil.
Yes, thank you, Shai. Finally, we agree on something.
We talk a lot about Gwyneth Paltrow here.
Yes.
But kale chips are really good, and they're a great alternative to potato chips. Really easy to make.
How so?
Olive oil, a little bit of coarse salt. Okay. Just a little. And you put it in the toaster oven, 10 minutes, you've got crispy kale chips.
Wait. I don't need to do anything to the kale before I put it in the toaster oven?
You just peel it off.
You peel it off.
Peel it off the stem. Olive oil, coarse salt, 10 minutes in the oven, and you have a tasty treat. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but like anything that's trendy,
yes,
there's a drop in popularity. So
and that happened to me. Yes.
So recently, a molecular biologist named Ernie Hubbard did a study on kale and the health conditions that are associated with kale. And he found in his patients hair loss, chronic fatigue, foggy thinking. That's probably why I always forget
sorry,
things.
people, I said it here first. Kale kills. Okay. And,
but I mean, he found what he did find was in their urine, he found a toxic metal. Okay, and this toxic metal comes from coals into the soil, and kale absorbs it. But
more so than other vegetables, most likely.
Exactly. People freaked out. Obviously, they are freaking out.
Gwyneth didn't leave the house for a week. Yes.
The problem with this hypothesis is that there's no published, peer-reviewed studies that there's any association between kale and health conditions in humans.
Right.
And also, the people that he did the studies on were overeating kale and buying kale from the same produce, which means that the kale, not all of them from the same one, but each of them were continually buying from the same person. And that means that the kale was coming from the same soil.
So,
okay?
Yes.
Scientists say that even if you eat a pound a day of kale, it's totally fine. I'm
just sad for the people who want to eat a pound of kale throughout the day.
I love kale.
You love kale?
I love kale.
We may have to have a kale off. We may have to have a kale off and see if maybe that's the thing we do next week around this table.
Kale
a
off.
Pound of kale that we're all going to try and consume. I have a feeling Shai Ringel will win, but that's just me. Yes.
I consulted with a few friends of mine, a few doctors I know, nutritionists, which all said the same thing, that if you eat kale, not overeating, you know, if you eat a little bit a day or a little bit a week, it should be fine.
That's also, and I think, you know, what's fascinating about this, just to make a serious note of it, whenever something is trendy, people will jump on it, consume it like maniacs. In many
Miley
ways.
Cyrus. There's a good example.
Yes, Miley Cyrus and kale. Miley Cyrus. What about Miley Cyrus?
No, I'm saying Miley Cyrus was popular, and then
exactly.
And also rotate where you buy kale. But let's get like realistic. At the end of the day, I mean, people get more sick by not eating fresh fruits and vegetables than by eating kale.
Exactly.
You know, we have to be realistic.
Realistic in that respect. So no, and maybe we need to have a week-long experiment on this. I'm losing my train of thought and words. It's all the kale. But yes, moving along.
But I did find an alternative to kale. Now you guys know about this before anyone else. Okay.
Shai?
It's called dulse. Okay, and it's a red seaweed. Yeah, it's not out yet. It's not even, you can't even buy it yet, but it's been discovered.
It's the vegetable that's not out yet. That's amazing.
Yes. Yeah, okay.
Dulse is the new kale. It contains vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, and it has twice the amount of nutritional value. Twice the amount over kale.
What does it taste like? Does anybody know?
Bacon.
Oh, come on.
This is its thing. It tastes like bacon. I thought you knew. That's why you were asking.
Okay. We have a mini report about this. Let's have a look.
Oregon State University's Hatfield Marine Science Center created a new type of seaweed superfood that they claim tastes just like bacon. But instead of being high in fat and sodium like the pork product, scientists say their bacon-flavored seaweed is even healthier for you than kale. This red seaweed called dulse grows along the Pacific coast and sort of looks like red lettuce.
Looking at the time. We've got to. Wow.
Yep.
Sorry, I was. We had a little discussion here. Dulce, I have to say something about that presenter.
Yeah.
She should eat something more other than dulce. I mean, really, ouch. Okay, dulce, I will believe it when I taste it. That's
she should eat McDonald's, because that's what I'm getting to right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so McDonald's mocked kale in an ad they did. Yeah, McDonald's. There's no connection between McDonald's and kale, except for this ad. I want to show you.
Okay, let's take a look at the ad.
Yeah.
Okay.
All vegetarians, foodies, and gastronauts kindly avert your eyes. You can't get juiciness like this from soy or quinoa. This is not Greek yogurt. Nor will that ever be kale. In its lifetime, it won't be deconstructed or infused. And while it is massive, its ego...
Yes. I don't know what about you guys. I'm hungry.
I'm vegetarian, so...
okay, I don't have that problem. But yeah, yes.
But
Yum.
McDonald's is joining forces with kale. Okay,
of course.
They have to, you know, they have to give in to the popularity and the trend. And so funny enough, so right after this ad, they announced that they're joining forces, and that has nothing to do with the ad, but okay, whatever.
What are we going to look at?
They're testing it in their breakfast bowls. I don't know. We're going to see what that's going to be like.
Time will tell. Maya.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Locked with us in studio. Don't move, because because with the time that we have left, it is time for Shai Ringel, the Tube magazine, and anything and everything geeky.
Yeah, I'm sorry I don't have any kale or any other weird vegetable that is not out yet. But I do have...
Maya, I have to explain to you, Shai Ringel is a hipster. You and I are not.
Oh, hipsters. You know, hipsters called their kids kale.
They do?
Yeah.
Aha!
Yeah.
What?
Okay.
So you do have a connection.
Yes. Moving along.
Okay. I'm here to talk about things that are much less...
important?
Yeah, the Islamic State.
Oh!
Yeah, good morning.
Wow. Yes, because we have Islamic State.
Yeah, because we want to talk about the Islamic State and the fabulous work they do online and in Twitter specifically. We have a report.
Okay. No, that's the fabulous. I think, you know, just putting joking aside, because this is not a laughing matter, but it's the amount. I look at the ISIS videos online, and the thing that terrifies me the most is the fact that they're so good at it.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about killing, I'm talking about the propaganda. Let's have a look.
From this school in East London to the Islamic State group in Syria. These 3 students left the UK in February to join IS group militants and are believed to now be living around Raqqa, with 2 having married Islamist fighters. Although thousands of miles away, these London-based researchers maintain an intimate view into the lives of such girls, tracking their digital footprints. The common theme, promoting their new lives.
Contrasting her life now in Islamic State and what it might have been like in the West, with a very positive spin. Posting a picture of my pizza, there's an underlying message here of domesticity, and describing pizza better than Pizza Hut is very explicitly saying that some conditions in Islamic State territory are better than conditions in the West.
An estimated 550 Western women have joined the IS group. Social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook are central to pulling in new recruits and spreading Islamist propaganda. But the researchers have found that shutting down such accounts can actually make matters worse.
So we're seeing people whose accounts have been taken down who will gain more followers after being suspended than beforehand. So it's kind of counterproductive in a way.
Melanie and Erin don't contact the women they follow, but the risks are still high.
I know I personally have had a couple Twitter death threats. I know other people that have had more than a couple Twitter death threats.
Farouk Aftab works closely with young Muslims in the UK, and top of his agenda is maintaining open dialogue about Islam.
We've been working with youth to engage them, to find out their concerns and to give them the true message of Islam so that they understand what their religion is, and then they can stay away from influences like ISIS.
Erin and Melanie's research shows that young recruits are not just naive jihadi brides, but often as ideologically committed as the men. And with 46,000 Twitter accounts linked to supporters of the IS group, the militants' potential reach is massive. Women in the Islamic State group may be banned from the battlefield, but they're certainly on the front line of a social media war.
Shai Ringel with us from the Tube magazine. I think, you know, I read a fascinating article about this in the New York Times where they just tracked one woman who was being, you know, basically dragged into ISIS via social media. The thing that's concerning about this is that it's untrackable, is it? For the people who are making these, you know...
Yeah, it's untrackable, and the interesting thing is that there has been, for the last year, a lot of attempts to try and fight this this thing, and it's failing miserably every time. But we do have to remember that it's not at a big scale like we think it is. It's not a lot of people do the transition of coming from the West and traveling into Syria.
Still, I mean, I think irrespective of the numbers of the people who are doing it, it's that form of, you know, of recruiting that I personally find very frightening. Because even if it's a few people now and it's there's no way of tracking them.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that because it's online, we can trace them before and after. So there's something a lot of people put Twitter accounts when they get there, and we can see their new lives. And there has been a lot of cases where people saw that this teenager went to Syria and started to he told that he's miserable there and he's bored and there's nothing to do, and like these kids don't understand what's going on.
What's going on and where they're heading.
Yeah.
And that and I think that's one of the main problems, because irrespective, as I said, of the numbers, it's not many, but the people who do end up in Syria, you know, it's ending up in a civil war with stringent, horrific, extremist rules that nobody can, you know, get out of.
Yeah.
Sadly, I think that's almost all the time that we have, but you did have something slightly more uplifting at the end. We've managed to kill Kale and also look at ISIS. That's a morning show for you guys, I have to say, but all the time that we have, of course, do not forget to check us out. I'm going to regain my voice in a second. Check us out on all those social outlets, Facebook, Twitter, whatnot. Of course, tune in tomorrow morning for another edition of your morning edition on I-24 News, the place to be, to get all the day's events, and stay with us for today, for the rest of the day. We're going to leave you off with Today in History, amazing footage from the Associated Press, 1956. This has just been released online by the AP to YouTube. Marilyn Monroe arriving to the UK, that's 1956. Marilyn Monroe, the woman, the legend, who actually died this week, many years ago. Let's have a look.
She's here, said the headlines, and everyone knew they meant the American film star with the famous shape and the wiggly walk. London Airport was all keyed up for Marilyn's arrival. She was met by Sir Laurence Olivier and his wife Vivian Leigh. Miss Munro is Mrs. Miller now. That's her playwright husband. Next, a press interview, but this had its difficulties. It went something like this.
Now, wait a minute. Miss Munro, please. Miss Munro. What do you think of Miss Dawes, you see?
Later, at a London hotel, Marilyn agreed to face the cameras again. Once more, it became abundantly clear that her worldwide fame and popularity made her visit to Britain front page news.